Check out this hanging stocking cake I made. This whole thing was literally hanging by a ribbon off my fireplace. Let me show you how I made this crazy thing, but first be sure to leave a comment below with your guess on how much you think this cake weighed. I started by tracing one of our stockings so I would have a life-size template to work with. I knew this cake was going to be pretty heavy, so I knew a sturdy structure was going to be very important. So the inside has two wood platforms connected by a dowel. The platforms are parallel to the floor, so it can provide good support for everything that'll sit on top of it. The bottom half of the cake is going to be Rice Krispie treats because the toe and heel areas don't have anything holding it up from the bottom. We can sculpt Rice Krispies and it's a bit lighter than cake. And then the top half is going to be cake. So after some cuts, nails, holes, and glue, here's our completed structure. I'm also adding this eye hook here so we can attach the ribbon for hanging up the stocking later. Our store was actually out of regular Rice Krispies, so we're just going to go with Cocoa Krispies. If you're going to use Rice Krispie treats for cake structure, leave out the butter and add more Krispies. In this case, you want sturdiness, not chewy goodness, and it's still going to taste just fine. Now we're basically going to embed our structure into the Rice Krispies. So I should mention that I covered the wood completely with foil since you don't want the wood touching any of the edible parts. Then covering the foil with melted marshmallows would help the Krispies stick to it. And then just really pack this thing in and shape the Krispies into the shape of the stocking. So here I have 2 layers of cake leveled up. Together they should be about as tall as the Rice Krispie part. Cut out the shape for the stocking part, then dig a channel out from both layers of cake to make room for that dowel. Once that's done, lay down the bottom layer, spread on some ganache, put in that structure, then lay the top layer down on top of it. Use a knife to round out the edges of the cake to make it more stocking shaped, and then ganache the heck out of it. So think of ganache as delicious chocolate glue. Ganache is 2 parts chocolate and 1 part cream and sets up really firmly. So if I had to say hang a cake off a nail, I would trust ganache to hold it together. So normal cakes are sitting on something, so you don't need to frost the bottom. But since we're hanging this thing, there is no bottom, which means we need to cover the other side, which means that we have to flip this thing over and have it sit on the rounded side without crushing everything. So I got some memory foam, covered it with plastic, made sure that the cake was really cold and firm, flipped it and hoped for the best, and it was actually perfectly fine. I ganached the heck out of this side too, and now the entire cake is encased in chocolate. I covered the side with fondant pattern to match our existing stockings. Totally extra and no one will see it, but I will know that it's there and it'll make me happy. To make a knit pattern, I actually used a mold. This is the first time I'm using molds and somehow I feel like I'm cheating, but there was no way I'm going to do this letter pattern by hand. These pieces come out with straight edges, so I made divots in the fondant so it'll look more convincing when you're piecing them together like they're woven. Then you stick these on with a little water, piecing them together and try not to ruin the pattern by pressing too hard. This took what seemed like forever. Now for the cuff at the top of the stocking, I added some Tylose powder to the fondant. Tylose powder is a hardening agent that helps fondant to dry hard, which we're going to need for the cuff to stand up on its own. I made the cuff go all the way around, then added this rib detail to give it more texture. I love texture. This is also using a mold, and we are pretty much done. This thing was heavy. It was basically a whole 9-inch cake, 2 batches of Rice Krispie treats, about 1.5 pounds of ganache, and about 3.5 pounds of fondant on it. To hold that, I put in an extra screw next to our usual stocking nail. Everything held together really well. We kept the cake cold before hanging it, and we actually had it hanging for over 3 hours before cutting into it, and it was so good. For those of you who were wondering how much this weighed, it came out to a whopping 14.4 pounds. Then we took away the weight of the board and the foam, and it ended up being 13.5 pounds. Hope you enjoyed watching me make this hanging stocking cake. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to see more fun cake projects and tutorials, or let me know what other crazy cakes you think I should make.
I can't believe you just ruined that.
What am I supposed to do?